The worst betrayal in my life didn't come from an enemy. It came from the woman who gave birth to me. The rain tapped softly against the bus window as I stared at the blurry lights of downtown Chicago sliding past in streaks of gold and white. My phone sat silent in my lap. No messages. No missed calls. No one wondering where I was. At 26 years old, I should have been used to disappointment by now. But some nights still found new ways to hurt. I adjusted the sleeve of my thrift store coat and glanced at my reflection in the dark glass. Tired blue eyes. Pale skin. Blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail that had already started falling apart after my shift. 8 hours serving coffee. 3 hours helping an elderly neighbor with groceries for extra cash. And somehow I still couldn't afford next month's rent. The city outside looked beautiful. My life didn't. When the bus finally stopped near my apartment building, I stepped into the cold October air and pulled my coat tighter around me. The wind carried the smell of rain and distant traffic. I checked my mailbox out of habit. Empty. Nothing surprising there. The stairwell smelled like old paint and stale air as I climbed to the third floor. My apartment wasn't much. 500 square feet. Peeling wallpaper. A heater that worked whenever it felt like it. But it was mine. Or at least it had been until the overdue notices started appearing under my door. I unlocked it and froze. The lights were on. My mother was sitting at my kitchen table. Karen Bennett looked exactly the same as she had 6 months ago when I promised myself I was done with her drama forever. Perfect makeup. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. The kind of smile that always meant trouble. "Grace," she said warmly, standing up as if we were a happy family. "There you are." My stomach tightened instantly. "How did you get in?" Her smile never moved. "You really should hide your spare key better." I closed the door behind me. "What do you want?" She pressed a hand dramatically against her chest. "Is that how you greet your mother?" "Usually, yes." For a second, annoyance flashed across her face before disappearing behind another smile. "I came because I have good news." Every bad decision in my life had started with those words. I dropped my purse onto the counter. "I'm not interested." "You will be." Her eyes sparkled strangely. "Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. Or something nice." I laughed once. A short, humorless sound. "No. Grace." Her voice sharpened. "This is important. Everything is always important with you." I moved toward the refrigerator. Empty except for half a gallon of milk and a container of yogurt. My dinner. Last year it was a business opportunity. Before that it was an investment. Before that it was your new boyfriend who needed a place to stay. This is different. They're all different. Silence stretched between us. Rain tapped softly against the apartment window. Somewhere outside, a siren echoed through the city. My mother crossed her arms. "You still blame me?" I almost smiled. Still. The room suddenly felt smaller. Heavier. Certain memories had a way of lingering no matter how hard you tried to bury them. Broken promises. Empty bank accounts. Trust given away and never returned. My mother sighed dramatically. "I came here to help you. Then start by leaving." Her eyes narrowed. "You're struggling." "I'm managing." "You can barely pay your rent." That made me pause. "How do you know that?" For the first time, she looked away. Just for a second. But it was enough. A chill crawled down my spine. "Mom." Her gaze returned to mine. "Come." "Calculated." "Tomorrow night," she repeated softly. 7 o'clock. The Grand Monarch Hotel. Something about the way she said it made my pulse quicken. "Why?" Her smile returned. "Too perfect. Too rehearsed. Because someone wants to see you." "Ist her." Every instinct I had screamed that this was a mistake. A trap. The beginning of something I wasn't going to like. "Who?" I asked quietly. My mother's smile widened. "You'll find out tomorrow." Then she picked up her designer purse, walked to the door, and left me standing alone in the tiny apartment. The silence afterward felt wrong. Heavy. Like the air before a storm. I looked out the window as rain began falling harder over the city skyline. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly felt afraid of tomorrow. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's smile. Not the warm version she showed strangers. The other one. The one that usually appeared right before my life became more complicated. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the gray clouds still hung low over Chicago like a warning. I spent the entire day trying to convince myself not to go. At work, I burned a batch of muffins because I kept replaying our conversation. I forgot 2 customer orders. I even dropped a tray of coffee cups, something I had not done in years. By 6 o'clock that evening, my manager sent me home early. "You look exhausted, Grace," she said gently. "Get some rest." I almost laughed. Rest was the last thing waiting for me. At 6:30, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror staring at the nicest dress I owned. It was navy blue. Simple. Bought on clearance 3 years earlier for a friend's wedding. I had no idea why I was even getting ready. Curiosity, maybe. Or the stubborn hope that this time my mother might actually be telling the truth. The Grand Monarch Hotel sat in the heart of downtown, 30 stories of glass, marble, and money. The kind of place where people ordered room service that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. As my rideshare pulled up to the entrance, my stomach tightened. Luxury cars lined the curb. Valets moved efficiently beneath golden lights. Everyone looked like they belonged there. Everyone except me. I stepped out and adjusted my coat. The cold air brushed against my face as I stared up at the building. Something felt wrong. I could not explain it. I just knew. Inside, the lobby looked like a movie set. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A pianist played softly in the distance. People in expensive suits crossed the marble floor carrying conversations worth more than my entire apartment. My mother was already waiting. She stood beside a fountain near the center of the lobby, wearing an elegant black dress, and enough jewelry to pay off my student loans twice. "There you are," she said brightly. "You are late." I almost did not come. "But you did." She checked the time on her phone. Good. I hated the way she said that. Like I had just completed a step in a plan she had already mapped out. "Who am I meeting?" I asked. "You will see soon." "Mom. Relax." She linked her arm through mine before I could stop her. "Everything is going to work out." Those words made me even more nervous. We entered a private dining room on the 2nd floor. The moment the doors opened, conversation stopped. Not completely. Just enough for me to notice. My heartbeat quickened. There were maybe 20 people inside. Men in tailored suits. Women wearing designer gowns. Every table decorated with white roses and candlelight. At the center of the room stood a long table, and at the far end sat a man. My breath caught instantly. Dark hair, broad shoulders, impeccable black suit, a face I had spent years trying to forget. Adrian Moretti. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Suddenly I was 22 again. Heartbroken. Confused. Walking away from the man who had shattered every dream I had ever built around him. Adrian slowly lifted his eyes. They found mine immediately. As if they had been waiting. As if no one else in the room existed. The silence stretched. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Dangerous. Then my mother squeezed my arm and smiled. "Grace," she said softly. "You are the guest of honor tonight." And for the first time, real fear settled into my chest. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it over the soft music drifting through the room. For a moment, I could not move. I could not breathe. I could only stare at Adrian Moretti sitting at the far end of the table, like a ghost from a life I had spent 4 years trying to escape. He looked older than I remembered. Sharper. More controlled. The careless confidence of his 20s had been replaced by something quieter and far more intimidating. Power. Real power. The kind that did not need to announce itself. Around him, conversations resumed cautiously. Glasses clinked. Waiters moved silently between tables. Yet everyone seemed aware of him. Every glance eventually returned to the man at the center of the room. My mother gently guided me forward. "Come on," she whispered. "Everyone is waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked. She ignored the question. That alone told me everything I needed to know. We reached the long table. Adrian slowly rose to his feet. At 6'3", he seemed even taller than I remembered. His dark suit fit perfectly. His expression revealed nothing. Not anger. Not warmth. Nothing. The emptiness unsettled me more than anything else could have. For years ago, I had known exactly how to read him. Every smile. Every look. Every change in his voice. Now he felt like a stranger wearing Adrian's face. "Grace," he said quietly. Hearing my name in his voice sent an uncomfortable ache through my chest. "Adrian." The single word felt heavier than it should have. Silence stretched between us. Then my mother suddenly stepped forward holding a folder. A thick folder. Cream-colored. Expensive. My stomach dropped instantly. "Since everyone is here," she announced brightly, "we can finally make this official." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave. "Official?" I repeated. Karen opened the folder and placed several documents on the table. I barely glanced at them before seeing numbers. Lots of numbers. My breath caught. "Mom." Her smile widened. "You always worried about money, sweetheart. About rent. Bills. Student loans. Well, not anymore." A cold sensation crawled up my spine. "What did you do?" Adrian remained completely still. Watching. Waiting. My mother's fingers rested proudly on the paperwork. "I solved everything." "Mom." My voice came out sharper. "What did you do?" The room suddenly felt too warm. Too small. Several guests quietly looked away, as if they already knew what was coming. My mother's smile never wavered. "Mr. Moretti has agreed to clear every debt connected to our family." My heart stopped. Every debt. Not just mine. Hers too. Years of bad decisions. Failed investments. Loans she never repaid. Promises she never kept. "No. Iwisparat." In return, she continued smoothly, we agreed that Grace would stay under his protection. The word slammed into me. Protection. Such a polite word. Such a dangerous word. I stared at her in disbelief. "You agreed?" She blinked. "Of course." "Without asking me?" "I am your mother." I looked. Back at Adrian. Finally, his eyes met mine. Steady. Unreadable. I expected satisfaction. Victory. Something. Instead, I found something far stranger. Regret. Deep and unmistakable regret. My mother pushed the papers toward me. "Sign these and everything changes." My hands trembled. Not from fear. From anger. Years of anger. Years of disappointment. Years of being treated like a problem someone else could solve. Slowly, I looked from the documents to Adrian. "Did you know about this?" I asked. His jaw tightened slightly. The first crack in his composure all evening. Then he answered with a voice so calm it almost frightened me. "No. Not this part." The room fell completely silent. Even the soft music seemed distant now. My mother stared at Adrian as if she had not expected that answer. Honestly, neither had I. For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across her face. "What do you mean, not this part?" she asked. Adrian slowly stood from his chair. The movement was calm, controlled, but every eye in the room followed him. He looked at the stack of papers for several seconds before turning toward my mother. "I agreed to purchase the debt," he said evenly. "I did not agree to involve Grace in any arrangement." My mother laughed nervously. "That is a misunderstanding. We discussed her future." "You discussed her future?" His voice remained quiet. Somehow that made it more powerful. Not me. I could barely process what I was hearing. The pressure in my chest shifted slightly. Not relief. Not yet. But confusion. Deep confusion. My mother opened her mouth to argue again, but Adrian lifted one hand. She stopped immediately. That alone told me how much influence he carried. The room seemed to belong to him. The building seemed to belong to him. Maybe the entire city did. Yet his attention remained fixed on me. Not my mother. Me. "Grace," he said softly. "You do not have to sign anything." I stared at him. For years ago, those words would have meant everything. For years ago, I would have trusted him without hesitation. But 4 years changes people. For years teaches painful lessons. "You expect me to believe that?" I asked. Something flickered behind his eyes. Hurt. Gone almost instantly. I am not asking you to believe anything tonight. That is convenient. The words escaped before I could stop them. A few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Adrian did not react. You disappeared from my life. I continued quietly. You made your choice. My voice remained steady, but inside I could feel old memories pulling at me. The sleepless nights. The unanswered calls. The silence that followed when I needed answers most. Adrian looked down briefly. For the first time all evening, he seemed less like the powerful man everyone feared, and more like someone carrying a weight he could never quite put down. I know, he said. Just 3 words. No excuses. No explanations. Somehow that made them harder to hear. My mother suddenly stepped forward again. This is ridiculous. We are here to solve a problem. No, I said. Both of them looked at me. You are here because you created a problem. Her expression hardened immediately. Watch your tone. I almost laughed. Even now. Even after everything. She still believed she could control the conversation. You came to my apartment. You manipulated me into coming here. You tried to make decisions about my life without asking me. I shook my head slowly. No more. The words surprised even me. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because I was finally tired of carrying everyone else's mistakes. My mother's face flushed with anger. You would still be struggling without my help. I would rather struggle than be traded like a business deal. Silence crashed over the room. Several people lowered their eyes. Others pretended not to listen. Adrian never looked away from me. Then something unexpected happened. My mother grabbed her purse. Fine. Her voice trembled slightly. Do whatever you want. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor until the doors finally closed behind her. Gone. Just like that. I released a breath I had been holding for what felt like hours. Suddenly the room felt enormous. Empty. Dangerous in a completely different way. Because now there was only Adrian and me. For years of unfinished questions. Standing between us. He glanced at the abandoned paperwork. Then without a word, he picked up the entire stack. The papers tore cleanly down the middle. Then again. And again. White fragments drifted onto the table like snow. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Adrian placed the torn pieces aside and looked directly at me. You were never part of the debt, Grace. His voice was low. Steady. Absolute. And you never will be. For several seconds, nobody moved. Tiny pieces of paper rested across the polished tablecloth, like the remains of a decision that should never have existed. I stared at them, then at Adrian. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part remembered exactly how dangerous hope could be. The guests slowly returned to their conversations, relieved that the tension had passed. Chairs shifted. Glasses clinked. Soft laughter cautiously returned. Yet the distance between Adrian and me felt larger than the entire room. You should go home, I said quietly. His eyes never left mine. I can arrange transportation. I know how to call a rideshare. Something almost resembling a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It disappeared just as quickly. That was always one of your favorite responses. The comment caught me off guard. Because I remembered. Years ago, whenever he tried to help, I always insisted on doing everything myself. Back then he used to call me stubborn. I used to call it survival. Neither of us had been wrong. People do not change that much, I replied. A shadow crossed his expression. Some do. The answer felt heavier than it should have. I looked away first. Outside the tall windows, city lights reflected against the dark Chicago skyline. The rain had returned, tracing silver paths down the glass. I suddenly felt exhausted. Emotionally exhausted. Physically exhausted. Tired of carrying questions with no answers. Tired of old wounds that never seemed to fully heal. Why did you buy her debt? I asked. The question surprised even me. Adrian remained silent for several moments. Long enough that I almost thought he would refuse to answer. Then he slowly pulled out a chair across from him. Sit down. That is not an answer. No. But it is. A start. I should have left. Every instinct told me to walk away. before he found another way to break my heart. Yet curiosity remained stronger than caution. It always had been. Reluctantly, he said. The room around us faded into background noise. Adrian rested his hands on the table. Calm. Controlled. The same man who could command an entire room without raising his voice. 3 months ago, he said, someone brought me a file. My stomach tightened. A file? He nodded. Information regarding your mother. I almost laughed. That could have filled an entire library. Karen has accumulated significant debt over the last several years. That is not surprising. No. His voice remained steady. What surprised me was seeing your name attached to several of those obligations. My pulse quickened. What? Loans? Financial guarantees? Property agreements? Confusion flooded through me. I never signed anything. His jaw tightened slightly. That is what I eventually discovered. Cold realization settled over me. My mother. Again. Another secret. Another problem created without my knowledge. Adrian watched my expression carefully. Not with judgment. With concern. Genuine concern. The realization unsettled me more than anger would have. So you bought the debt because of that? I asked. He looked toward the rain-covered windows. I bought the debt because I knew exactly what would happen if I did not. Silence stretched between us. The city lights shimmered across the glass. And what would happen? I asked softly. Adrian turned back toward me. For the first time all evening, his composure slipped. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see the truth underneath. You would have paid the price for mistakes that were never yours. My chest tightened. Something dangerous stirred beneath years of resentment. Not trust. Not forgiveness. But something equally frightening. The possibility that the man sitting across from me was not the same man I had spent 4 years hating. The drive back to my apartment felt strangely quiet. Adrian insisted on arranging a car despite my protests. And somehow I was too tired to argue. Chicago drifted past the window in a blur of rain-soaked streets and glowing storefronts. I kept replaying our conversation in my head. The way he spoke. The way he looked at me. The way he had torn those documents apart without hesitation. None of it fit the version of Adrian I had carried around for 4 years. That version had been cold. Distant. Impossible to reach. The man I saw tonight looked tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. Like someone who had spent years carrying regrets too heavy to put down. When the car stopped outside my building, I stepped onto the sidewalk and wrapped my coat tighter around myself. The rain had eased into a light mist. The city felt quieter than usual. Almost peaceful. My phone buzzed the second I reached my apartment door. My stomach dropped when I saw the caller. Mom. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. By the 4th call I answered. What? Silence. Then a sharp exhale. You embarrassed me tonight. I laughed in disbelief. That is what you are worried about. You have no idea what you ruined. Her voice trembled with frustration. I was trying to secure our future. Our future. I unlocked my apartment and stepped inside. You mean your future? She ignored that. Do you know how much money was involved? I do not care. You should. Her voice hardened. Because you are not seeing the entire picture. The warning in her tone made me pause. What picture? Another silence. Longer this time. Some debts do not disappear just because paperwork changes hands. A chill slid down my spine. What does that mean? It means you should stop trusting Adrian Moretti. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for several seconds. The apartment suddenly felt colder. Empty. The heater rattled weakly in the corner. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. I should have ignored her. My mother had spent years using fear as leverage. Yet something about her voice lingered. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. I tried sleeping. It did not work. Midnight came and went. Then 1 in the morning. At 2:15, I gave up and walked into the kitchen for water. That was when I noticed the envelope. It had been slid beneath my front door. My pulse quickened instantly. The thick cream-colored envelope looked expensive. Familiar. Carefully, I picked it up. No stamp. No address. Just my name written across the front. Grace Bennett. My hands suddenly felt unsteady. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Nothing else. My breath caught. The image showed Adrian standing beside a younger version of me from years ago. I remembered the day immediately. Summer. Lake Michigan. A charity event neither of us wanted to attend. We were smiling. Happy. Before everything fell apart. Before the silence. Before the heartbreak. My eyes drifted to the back of the photograph. There was handwriting. One sentence. Simple. Precise. Familiar. I recognized Adrian's handwriting instantly. The message read, "You never learned why I let you go." And for the first time that night, my heart began beating faster for a completely different reason. I read the sentence 3 times before setting the photograph down on my kitchen table. The apartment felt impossibly quiet. Outside, rain whispered against the glass. Inside, every memory I had spent 4 years burying suddenly felt alive again. You never learned why I let you go. I hated that sentence. Hated how quickly it slipped beneath my defenses. Hated that part of me wanted an explanation. For years ago, I had begged for one. I had waited for calls that never came. Sent messages that never received answers. Eventually, silence became its own answer. At least that was what I forced myself to believe. Yet now, staring at the photograph, certainty began to crack. I slept for maybe 2 hours. By morning, my alarm sounded like a fire alarm inside my skull. I dragged myself to work and spent most of the day trying to focus on customers instead of memories. It did not work. Every time the front door opened, I looked up. Every time my phone vibrated, my pulse jumped. Around noon, my manager handed me a small envelope. "Somebody dropped this off for you," she said. My stomach tightened immediately. The envelope matched the one from the night before. Same cream paper. Same careful handwriting. I waited until my break before opening it. Inside was a folded note. Nothing else. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. "Meet me at 6. The Harbor Cafe. Come if you want the truth. Adrian." I stared at the message for a long time. The Harbor Cafe sat near Lake Michigan. The same place where we used to spend entire afternoons talking about impossible dreams and future plans. The same place where he once promised he would never disappear from my life. The irony almost made me laugh. At 5:30, I was still telling myself I would not go. At 5:45, I was sitting in my car heading toward the lake. Some habits never truly die. The sky had cleared by the time I arrived. Evening sunlight reflected across the water in ribbons of gold. The familiar blue sign of the cafe came into view. My heart immediately began racing. Adrian was already there. He sat alone near the window overlooking the lake. Dark suit. White shirt. A cup of coffee untouched in front of him. He looked up the second I entered. As if he had been watching the door the entire time. For a moment neither of us moved. Then I crossed the room and sat across from him. The silence felt strangely familiar. Like opening a book you once loved but never finished. "You came," he said quietly. "Do not sound surprised." Something almost resembling a smile touched his face. "Fair enough." I folded my arms. "You said you had the truth." His expression immediately grew serious. The warmth vanished. The man sitting across from me suddenly looked burdened by something much heavier than business or money. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a thin folder on the table between us. My pulse quickened. "What is that?" I asked. Adrian looked directly into my eyes. The sadness there startled me. The reason everything fell apart. He slowly pushed the folder toward me. And the reason I spent 4 years trying to find a way to fix it. My eyes remained fixed on the folder long after Adrian pushed it across the table. The sounds of the cafe seemed distant now. Coffee machines hissed. Dishes clinked softly. People talked around us. Yet all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Slowly, I opened the folder. The first page looked ordinary. Financial records. Account statements. Legal documents. Then, I saw my mother's name. Again and again. My stomach tightened. Adrian said nothing while I read. He simply watched me with the patience of someone who had waited years for this moment. I turned another page. Then another. Each document revealed the same pattern. Loans. Agreements. Transfers. Signatures. Some were hers. Some were not. My breath caught when I reached the final section. There, clipped neatly together, were copies of messages, emails, printed conversations, evidence. My hands suddenly felt cold. For years ago, shortly before Adrian disappeared from my life, someone had sent him information claiming I had been lying to him, that I had used him, manipulated him, planned to leave once I gained access to certain opportunities through his connections. I remembered that period clearly. His distance, the sudden change in his behavior, the unanswered calls. At the time, none of it made sense. Now I stared at the pages in disbelief. "These are fake," I whispered. Adrian nodded once. "I know." My eyes lifted to his. "You believed them." The words came out sharper than I intended. Pain flashed across his face. Real pain. Yes. Silence settled between us. Outside the cafe windows, waves rolled gently across the lake. Golden sunlight reflected off the water. The beauty of the scene felt almost cruel compared to the heaviness sitting between us. "Why?" I asked quietly. Adrian looked down at his untouched coffee. For several seconds he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded rougher than before. "Because at the time I trusted the wrong people." I swallowed hard. "Who sent them?" He met my eyes. "Someone working with your mother." The world seemed to tilt slightly. I stared at him, unable to process what I had heard. "No. I investigated after everything fell apart." His gaze remained steady. At first I wanted confirmation that I had made the right decision. A bitter smile touched his lips. Instead, I discovered the truth. My chest tightened painfully. Every memory suddenly looked different. Every unanswered question. Every sleepless night. Every tear I had hidden from the world. "You found out later?" I asked. Adrian nodded. 6 months. Later. The answer hit me harder than I expected. 6 months. He closed his eyes briefly. "I know. And you never came back." The accusation hung between us. This time he did not defend himself. He did not offer excuses. He simply accepted it. "I thought you hated me." I almost laughed. "I did hate you." The honesty surprised both of us. Adrian nodded slowly. "You had every reason to." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he reached into the folder and removed one final document. Unlike the others, it was worn at the edges. Folded many times. Carefully preserved. He placed it in front of me. "What is this?" I asked. His expression softened in a way I had not seen in years. "The first letter I wrote after I learned the truth." My pulse quickened. "You wrote me a letter?" Adrian gave a small nod. Regret shadowed his eyes. 117 of them, actually. I stared at him, completely speechless. Then he added quietly, "And I never had the courage to send a single one." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The noise of the cafe disappeared completely. 117 letters. The number echoed in my mind while I stared at the man across from me. Adrian looked away first, toward the lake beyond the window, where the evening sun was slowly sinking beneath the horizon. Orange light stretched across the water, turning everything gold. For years ago, I would have given anything to hear him say he was sorry. Now that moment had finally arrived, and I did not know what to do with it. Slowly, I unfolded the letter resting between us. The paper was worn from being handled too many times. I could tell immediately that he had read it over and over again. The handwriting was unmistakably his. "Grace, if you are reading this, then somehow I found the courage I do not have today." I stopped. My vision blurred slightly. I blinked and continued reading. I was wrong. Those 3 words hit harder than every explanation that followed. Not because they were dramatic. Not because they were poetic. Because they were simple. Honest. Real. Adrian had spent pages describing how he discovered the truth. How he realized he had trusted lies. How he learned that the woman he loved had never betrayed him at all. There were no excuses in the letter. No attempts to defend himself. Only accountability. By the time I reached the final paragraph, my chest ached. Not from anger. Not anymore. From grief. Grief for the years we lost. Grief for the future that never happened. Grief for two people who could have been happy if pride and fear had not stood in the way. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back on the table. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. I never expected forgiveness. His voice was quiet. Then why come back? He looked at me for a long moment. Because every year that passed made it harder to live with what I did. The honesty in his answer disarmed me. Outside, a small sailboat drifted across the lake. Somewhere behind us, a barista laughed at something a customer said. Life continued moving forward while mine felt suspended between the past and the future. And the debt? I asked. Why step in now? Adrian's expression softened. Because when I saw your name attached to those records, I realized something. What? He leaned back slightly. You were still paying for mistakes that were never yours. My throat tightened. That sentence felt painfully familiar. Maybe because it described more than money. Maybe because it described my entire life. Adrian reached into his jacket one final time and placed a small key on the table. I stared at it in confusion. What is this? A new apartment. I immediately shook my head. No. A faint smile appeared. I knew you would say that. I am serious. I know. He slid the key back toward himself. Which is exactly why I never signed the paperwork. I blinked. What? The apartment belongs to you only if you want it. If not, tomorrow morning the lease disappears. My heart skipped unexpectedly. No pressure. No conditions. No expectations. Just a choice. Something nobody had given me in a very long time. The sun slipped lower across the horizon. Golden light illuminated the side of Adrian's face. For the first time in years, I looked at him and did not see the man who broke my heart. I saw the man who finally understood how much it had cost. And for the first time in years, I realized healing does not begin when someone earns forgiveness. It begins when the truth finally has room to breathe.